Good morning, everyone. It is a great pleasure to welcome you to the 10th Annual SLO Symposium. My name is Jarek Janio, and I am ESL Department Chair at the Santa Ana College School of Continuing Education. I am also the SLO Symposium founder. It has been an incredible 10 years since we began this annual event to discuss the assessment of student learning. Over the past decade, we have made significant progress in understanding how to evaluate what students learn and the importance of focusing on skills and competency attainment has become a focus. We have come to realize that the traditional methods of assessment, such as grading and issuing certificates or diplomas, are not effective in determining student learning. Instead, we have shifted our focus to understanding what students can actually do as a result of instruction and how we can document and use student learning outcomes assessment data to improve teaching and learning. We have also come to understand the importance of engaging students in their own assessment and how this can lead to greater equity in student learning. Additionally, we have learned that faculty, potential employers, parents, and most importantly, students themselves want to know what learning takes place in institutions of higher education and how it can benefit them in their academic endeavors and future careers. One of the key challenges we face is a better understanding of competency-based education, which requires a shift in the way we think about teaching and learning. This means involving faculty in the assessment process and creating higher education institutional structures that support learning. Another challenge that we are facing is the emergence of artificial intelligence, which has caused consternation and a range of reactions from higher education institutions. Some have embraced the use of AI-driven tools, such as ChatGPT, while others have outright banned them. These need to be discussed and understood. This year's symposium, focused on relevant and equitable learning, is an attempt to extend the discussion to the field of competency-based education and to learn from institutions that thrive on the idea. In conclusion, I would like to thank you all for being here, and I hope that you will enjoy the symposium and gain valuable insights on how to improve student learning in your own institutions. With that, I would like to turn it over to Enrique Hauriki from Fresno City College. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Jarek. Thank you for those kind words. Thank you. And Happy New Year to all. I know it's late, but it's Happy New Year. So on behalf of Fresno City College, it is my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to all attendees. This event would not have been possible without the invaluable support of the coaches group. So thank you. Their dedication and contributions have been instrumental in making this a reality. So thank you once again. I would also like to thank this to take this opportunity to express our heartfelt appreciation to all presenters and especially the attendees for making this SLO Symposium a success. We hope that this event will serve as a valuable platform for sharing knowledge, fostering collaboration, promoting professional growth, and especially focus on student learning. So it is with great honor that I now introduce to you Don Lopez, our esteemed Vice President of Instruction and Interim District CTO. His leadership and guidance have been crucial. We are deeply grateful for your support, Don. Thank you.
Thank you, Enrique. I appreciate that. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 10th Annual SLO Symposium. As they said, my name is Don Lopez, and I've, for the past 7 years, been the Vice President of Instruction at Fresno City College. And this past semester, I was asked if I would fill in as the acting CTO for our district, and I'm doing so with great pleasure. I want to thank Jarek and Enrique Hauriki for their leadership, and to all of the committee for the great work that they've done in making sure that this event happens. I would be remiss to not send kind of a special thank you to Susie Nitzel, our professional development coordinator. Susie's really a rock star when it comes to making all of this work, and we couldn't do it without her. So Susie, thank you very much. So SEC has served for the past 3 years as the host for this particular event, and we are very proud to provide our support in this. We value the collaborative nature of this type of activity and the opportunity for all of you to showcase your best practices. Thank you again to our keynote speakers and to all of you for being here today. And I hope that the event proves to be of value to you. Thank you.
Good morning. I wanted to welcome everybody on behalf of the Coaches Group. If you don't know, Coaches is the California Outcome and Assessment Coordinator Hub. We started with this SLO Talks about March 2020. Yorick was the fearless leader, and through those talks, as they grew, and we realized that outcomes coordinators, SLO coordinators, and service area outcomes coordinators were in desperate need of some additional support and a way to collaborate with one another as we foster and support student learning. And this is what grew into the California Outcome and Assessment Coordinator Hub, which is lovingly referred to as the Coaches Group. Enrique put the link to our website in the chat, and our role is simply to support and to help connect other outcomes coordinators. And we are simply overjoyed to see how a very small group has grown into the attendees that are close to 500 enrolled for this SLO symposium. Today's agenda, we have our beautiful and wonderful keynote speaker lineup. We'll move into a quick break, and this will allow you to go into the breakout room of your choice. The sessions are listed in the lobby. You can easily select them and add them to your itinerary to reference and go into at your will. We have another quick break after that session, and then our breakout session number 2. We'll move into a lunch break, enjoy a lunch, and then make sure to come back at 12:45 for our open forum panel presentation. Just like our keynote that'll be following me, the open forum panel presentation will be more of a discussion. So we have some questions. I look forward to engaging in these wonderful panelists to help us navigate not just competency-based education, but a lot that has to do with outcomes and coordination. Another quick break, and then we go into our last breakout session, and we hope that you join us for the ending from at 3 o'clock today with our evaluation and our survey. And make sure to come back tomorrow for day 2 as well. We would always love to say a thank you to all of our symposium sponsors. Most of these are our home colleges and have generously utilized their human capital and time to help contribute to this wonderful event that you are attending today and tomorrow. Yorick, take it away.
Thank you very much, Amanda. And with that, let's move on to the main part of our program. This year, we are privileged to have not one, but 3 keynote speakers who have extensive experience working at competency-based education institutions. Dr. Richard Senese, president of Capella University, Dr. Cynthia Howell, professor of education at Capella as well, and Dr. Margaret Moodian, faculty of humanities at University of Massachusetts Global. Each of the speakers will be introduced by one of the coaches, Dr. Alicia Betancourt from San Diego City College, Dr. Hiju Jiang from the College of San Mateo, and Bethany Tasaka from San Bernardino Valley College. As the keynotes are delivered, please share your thoughts and questions in the chat so that we can collect them and address them during today's symposium or later on the coach's blog. With that, I would like to extend the warmest welcome to the speakers and turn it over to Dr. Alicia Betancourt, who is going to introduce Dr. Richard Senese, Capella University president. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. As I'm following the chat, we have people from California, Nevada, Arizona, but all the way across the country in Massachusetts and New York, Virginia, Georgia, Kentucky. It's just amazing to see the wide variety of people that have attended today, and we really appreciate you joining us for this. I am incredibly excited to welcome Dr. Senese. I mentioned to him that I have his signature on my diploma as a graduate of Capella University, and he is the current president of Capella University. Capella, for those of you that are not aware, offers bachelor's, master's, specialists, doctoral, and certificate programs, and it's done through an online learning system using competency-based education. Dr. Senese is also a previous dean of Capella's Harold Abel School of Psychology. He's served many leadership roles within the University of Minnesota Extension, including the senior associate dean. He's taught at many different institutions across Minnesota. He is involved in many higher education associations, including being the chair of Board of Directors for the Center for Victims of Torture. His goals throughout his career has been to lead by supporting, advising, and counseling to help students realize their growth professionally, academically, and personally. He's also very involved in community development through Minnesota and beyond. He has a lot of interest in human rights, mental health, socioeconomic equity, and LGBTQ rights. He is a licensed psychologist, and he believes that emotional intelligence and collaboration are the keys to success. So everybody welcome Dr. Senese.
Well, thank you. And it's so great to meet an alumna of Capella. Thanks everyone for attending. I'm gonna give a bit of perspective on competency-based education in Capella from the president's point of view. My other two panelists will dive in probably to a little more detail. Thank you for that introduction. A little bit more about me. I'm a first-generation college student, like many first-generation college students. The number of times I almost quit, I can't even count. But, you know, ultimately I succeeded in completing my degrees. But that taught me something that isn't exactly the subject of this conversation, but that's really important, that education is ultimately interpersonal. And I try to remind our faculty and staff of that all the time, even though we operate in a asynchronous distance ed format. Ultimately, this is an interpersonal enterprise. I've been president at Capella for almost 8 years. As Alicia said, very active in a number of higher ed organizations, including LGBTQ leaders in higher ed, which I'm really proud of as networking and support for other members of the community in higher ed. Well, Capella University was founded nearly 30 years ago. Actually, it'll be 30 years on February 11th, if you want to help celebrate. And really the goal was to provide extended access to working adults seeking a graduate degree. We were founded as the Graduate School of America. In the late 90s, we began to add undergraduate completion to Capella University and change the name to Capella University. And Capella was chosen as a representation of a twin star. Capella is a twin star. And we talk about the relationship between learners and faculty as mutually beneficial, right? That we're learning from and with each other. Because working adults and adult learners bring so much to the table already in terms of either prior education, work experience, or just lived experience. We have had a competency-based curriculum model for well over 10 years. So all of our programs are competency-based. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And I know Dr. Howell, one of my colleagues, will talk about assessment in a little more detail around that issue. But the entire program catalog, all the courses line up to a competency-based model. And we have two distinct formats for delivering the curriculum. One is called Guided Path, and one is called Flex Path. Guided Path is the traditional online format, and Flex Path is a direct assessment model, a direct assessment format. And we were actually the first institution to be able to offer federal financial aid for bachelor's and master's degrees through the direct assessment approach to competency-based learning. We were part of a small group of pilot institutions during the Obama administration when the department wanted to implement direct assessment as a model to provide greater flexibility and greater affordability to working adults as they sought to advance in their educational pursuit and advance in their profession. So Capella has been a innovator and a disruptor, and we have some deeply held beliefs which might challenge traditional notions of higher ed. Some of them don't. Some of them directly align with traditional notions and traditional views in higher ed. First, we deeply believe that education is key to improving the lives of individuals, families, communities, and the world. Well, how do you make that practical then? Well, then you need to focus on helping people professionally develop and advance, right? You need to ensure to the best of your ability that programs are preparing people for opportunities that will help them gain economically, that will help them advance socioeconomically. So many of our learners at Capella and at, I'm sure, your institutions come with that goal in mind. At Capella, the average age is about 38 years old. Well over 80% of our learners are women. 70-some% are going part-time. And roughly half identify as a member of a BIPOC community. So we are, really helping people who are trying to advance for themselves and their families. Many of our learners, the majority, well over half, are first generation as well. So, the importance of what we're doing you can't lose sight of that, right? And that folks who complete our master's or doctoral programs are going on to apply scholarship to solve problems that they see in their communities and their professions. So that's something that's on the top of our mind. I think it's also important to understand that we recognize educational journeys are unique. No one person's journey is identical to another, right? And there's no reason that life events have to follow a particular order. There's no reason that you have to get your degree at 18 to 22, find a life partner. The order of events varies widely because people have different experiences, different backgrounds. And that the rise of learners older than 22, traditional age, is a real testament to that, right? 40 million Americans with some college but no final credential. And programs have to be structured to be responsive to learner life commitments, both in terms of the format and to create opportunities so that people with competing life commitments can still advance, can still do education. It's good for everyone if people with a diversity of lived experiences complete higher education, if that's their goal and in their life plan. And lifelong learning is important, right? Formal and informal learning is very valuable. And we strive at Capella to make credit for prior learning as widely available as we can. And there's always, I think, opportunities there. The rapidly increasing amount of knowledge, the new data and ideas are always challenging old. The economy is changing, new jobs are developing that we didn't even know about, right? So we have to have a model for the curriculum that helps us stay relevant. And that's another feature of competency-based education models, I believe. Programs and credentials need to be well-designed and meet learners where they're at. You need to have clear goals. You need to be transparent about what you're expecting. And then focus on professional relevance, flexibility, and affordability. So how do we take all those sort of lofty ideas, right, and make it practical and real. So we have found that competency-based education as a curriculum model allows us to do that. First, it ensures a strong value proposition for learners. The way we develop our programs is by examining the competencies that are expected of people with that credential. So, professional relevance cannot be understated. The vast majority of our learners, when we ask them, why are you coming back to school? It's to seek professional advancement. Most of our learners are in graduate programs. The plurality are in the master's program, followed closely by doctoral and bachelor's programs. But over 60% are pursuing graduate degrees. So we want to focus on the professional relevancy of a competency-based models allow us to do that, as well as to ensure some immediate applicability of learning if you're already in the field. So for example, somebody who may be working in finance is pursuing a MBA with a finance specialization. Well, what they're learning should be applicable to their job in the moment, to their profession, right? And we ask them about that on the end of course evaluations. We ask them about, can you apply what you're learning to your profession? Can you apply it to your community? Because that's a really important role of higher education, right? To improve the quality of life of our community and our society. So we ask those questions and we get very high responses in terms of the top two, saying that that's true. I think competency-based education also creates an opportunity to connect with the professional sector served, because it serves as that same language, right? By using competency-based language, you're able to talk to your advisory boards or licensing boards or other professional sectors. And it allows for the collection of a lot of data, which allows you to roll that data into annual program review. So everyone is sort of going in the same direction, right? So more specifically, what do I mean? Well, a competency-based model that we use, we look for the knowledge, skills, and professional dispositions that would be required of somebody with that credential in the profession. So that means that we have to be scanning relatively frequently what those are. And then we use backwards design to bring those competencies throughout the whole curriculum into courses. But for us, a competency is not a one and done thing. You don't have it, right? Just because you were able to do it once. So we find ways to embed assessment of the competencies throughout the curriculum. So for example, a program may have 28, let's say, competencies. Well, then in any one course, we may have demonstration opportunities of 4 to 6 of those, right? And the 28 competencies appear in multiple courses at varying levels of depth. So we call this a fully embedded model. And we're asking people to demonstrate competencies in different contexts, different professional contexts. And so we call that authentic assessment. So authentic assessment is we give learners, and Cynthia may have a slightly different definition, but we give learners the opportunity to demonstrate some aspect of the competency in varying professional contexts through the way the assessment is designed. Simple example, masters in IT leadership with leadership specialization. Create a change plan for your CRM platform in your company, right? And make a presentation to your board. So you're going to create that board presentation, but you're also going to create the backup references to the literature to support your choices that you've made, right? So that's an example of an authentic assessment in a professional context, right? There are lots of the competencies demonstrated there, represented in all of that, which will be repeated in other courses, in other contexts. So we give people this opportunity to demonstrate it. Another thing that makes us somewhat unique at Capella is and all of the English professors just now said you shouldn't use an adjective with unique, but anyway, that are maybe many institutions don't do, but we do, is we have a multi-level assessment model. So it's not yes or no. It's either non-demonstration, basic demonstration, proficient, or distinguished. So we have our rubric allows for faculty to make 4 levels of assessing any one competency demonstration embedded in the assessment. And an assessment may be focused on 3 or 4 competencies, might be represented in there. Could be your presentation skill, your knowledge of leadership, your knowledge of IT platforms, right? Could all be embedded in one assessment. So by using these 4 levels, we understand the variance, we pull apart a little bit more variance, and it's more specific feedback then to the learner, as opposed to yes or no. We also make the rubrics readily available. Like, before you do the assignment, before you know what the assignment is, you have the rubric. It's very transparent. And that kind of transparency, especially for any learner, but especially for adult learners returning back to school, it's a little anxiety producing. Can I really do school? But if you really know what the assessment is and what the faculty member will be looking for, then that's very helpful. So, I'm really proud of our whole model. It's a complete integrated model and package in many ways. And the National Institute on Outcome Learning Assessment, has recognized us for excellence in assessment, both in 2016 and in 2021, because of this model. So our curriculum structure is competency-based. Our assessment model is authentic assessment. And we use a fully embedded hierarchy and scaffolding structure, if you will, to make it all work. And we do it in every course, at every level, in every program, because we believe that if you have these clear goals and you have a clear sense of the learning outcomes, the competency demonstration, again, giving people the opportunity to demonstrate competencies in multiple contexts and multiple times, that's going to help them learn the competencies they need in their profession. So we do that in all of our programs, and in our traditional online format, which we call Guided Path. That's how it works. Again, that's asynchronous distance education. We also have another format we call Flex Path. And FlexPath, for the education public policy nerds among us, is part of a direct assessment regulation that the federal government has. And what FlexPath allows us to do, and direct assessment allows us to do, is rather than measure seat time and credit hour as the measure of progression, you actually measure the demonstration of competencies as the measure of progression. That's where the term direct assessment comes from. And the direct assessment model, FlexPath, allows much greater flexibility for learners. They can, at Capella, you can start any month in any program, in the Guided Path program. In FlexPath, I believe it's pretty much you can start any week. And so we're ready when you're ready, which is a really important message to working adults, right? Maybe they don't need to wait 3 months to start. Those kinds of things. So it's based on a 12-week billing session, 12-week subscription model, basically. So you can be concurrently registered for 2 courses simultaneously. The first thing you do when you get in one of those courses is you look at the syllabus for the course. What are the 4 or 5 assessments you're going to be asked to complete? And we ask you to tell us when you're going to do them. When in this 12-week period will you be submitting assessment number 1? because maybe, your nephew's graduating from college and you're traveling across the country to go see it. Or maybe, you have a vacation planned, or maybe whatever, right? You have life. And so you really aren't going to get started till week 4. Okay, that's fine, right? Because we're on your schedule now. You aren't on our schedule. We're on your schedule now. And so the first thing you do before you can even open up the course is you have to make this plan. And then our systems will remind you of this plan, right? As you might imagine. And if you need more time, that's fine too. You can extend and take up to 2 billing sessions to complete a course. Or maybe you can go faster. Maybe you're a high school teacher and you don't have summer commitments. And so you want to move through courses a little bit faster. Or maybe you're getting a master's degree in an area fairly well. And so learning the new material in the master's course comes more readily in one course or another course. And so you're able to move through those courses just a little more quickly because you're just more familiar with some of the foundational knowledge behind what you're learning. So, it's really up to you. So you can complete more than 2 courses during that 12 weeks if you're able to, right? You finish one maybe in 5 weeks or 4 weeks. You can take a third one, or you can extend it into a second billing session. So this creates as much flexibility as allowable under regulations right now. And that's really exciting. So, this may reduce costs for people. And we now have over 20,000 FlexPath graduates of programs with a FlexPath through the FlexPath format. And we have FlexPath available at all degree levels, including doctoral or professional doctorates in FlexPath. The EDD, the DBA, and the DNP are all available in the FlexPath model as well. So it's a really exciting kind of thing. And in terms of the results, we've done a lot. We are very data driven, and I pride Capella on having a strong evaluative culture. And we looked at the first 5 years of our FlexPath program. In 2019, we released a white paper, and the median time to complete for direct assessment bachelor's programs was 59% faster than similar learners in equivalent credit hour programs for us, right? So we use criteria matching. So we're looking at essentially the same learner in FlexPath and a similarly situated learner in Guided Path, and we're comparing those. So we do it's called propensity score matching. So it's a more complex design, but it allows you to really understand that these are essentially folks with the same background coming in. So in the bachelor's degree, they went 59% faster. Now, that means that some number of them, 41%, went slower because that's what they needed to do. That's great. For master's degree, 42% went faster. And so 58% took a little more time. Again, that's great because we want to fit education into your life, not for you to fit us into your life, right? So we want education to fit in that way. And then it can be more affordable. In our FlexPath programs, about 45% less federal financial aid was borrowed than in a typical credit hour program. And as a working adult, time marches on, right? So the studies that talk about the lifetime ROI earning potential of a bachelor's degree are usually based on starting at 22. Well, if your average age is 38, there's 16 years of, that are not in that timeline anymore. So having a more affordable option at age 38 is really key to actualizing as much of that economic return and salary benefit that higher ed can provide. Completion of a bachelor's or master's can provide. And the same, is true with tuition billing. We billed 60%, 59% less tuition for FlexPath learners, et cetera. And we also know that persistence is higher. So 23% higher persistence rate in FlexPath because the learner can manage the life barrier, right? They can manage the time. Just like those of us who may have the opportunity to work remotely, suddenly managing life commitments was easier in some weird way because we could also work in slightly hybrid different models, right? We are about to release a new study about our FlexPath program in the coming weeks. So we will work to get that to Jarek and others once it's public so that we can send it your way as well. Now, we believe, and we are a strong advocate, we've been a member of CBAN, the Competency-Based Education Network, since its inception. We advocate on the public policy realm all the time for competency-based education and direct assessment. And I do have a public policy background, having worked for a U.S. Senator from Minnesota and been involved in policy and electoral politics. And there are some policy frameworks that need to change. We need to reimagine financial aid. The traditional financial aid rules that are based on seat time and credit hour, they just make delivering direct assessment programs very complicated. Now, especially if you're a smaller school or doing a smaller program, it's just too complicated to do, which fails to serve the mission of the university because then there are learners and potential prospects who don't have access, right? We believe in sharing data, so releasing and evaluating data so that we can all learn from each other about it. Direct assessment, means also there's support. You have to couple direct assessment with support from faculty members, advisors, coaches, all kinds of support services. So all of that has to remain in place and in some ways be more robust and be more available, right? On a 24/7 basis. Maybe you have a AI chatbot to help, et cetera. And aligning with DEI initiatives. One of the things that I'm really proud of is the white paper that's coming out, it's this little tease, talks about how direct assessment relates to our equity goals and our inclusivity goals about helping learners from who identify as members of BIPOC communities advance as well. And then we need to expand credit for prior learning. We have to get over the notion that Dr. Senese's intro psych class, that was the best one ever. And nobody can get credit for that intro psych class if they didn't take it from me, right? So there are some clear policy things that need to change. But I think it is an idea whose time is coming and has come. And it's exciting to see so many people interested in both competency-based education, authentic assessment, and how do we assess the demonstration of competencies, and then repackaging the timing and pacing of learning to put it on the learner's schedule, not on the institution's schedule, through innovative ideas like FlexPath. And there may be other ideas as well. So I'm going to stop there. I know there have been some questions popping up in the chat. I don't know if we want to take those now or if we want to move on. I'll leave that up to you, Jarek. So thank you for the opportunity to have a discussion.
Of course, excellent. If I could just quick follow-up question for you. If you were to speak to traditional institution of higher learning, community college or four-year university, what would be a challenge or a piece of advice? What would be the focus, the first step on the road to implement competency-based education or build a model that's similar to yours?
I think the first step is to really look at what you're doing from the outside in. So when I taught psychology at St. Olaf College, the closest thing to aligning my course to whatever else was happening in the psych major was I was given a list of 100 terms that students were expected to know coming out of my intro psych course. Beyond that, I was free to design the content of the course based on my scholarly interests, which certainly has an appropriate place. And I also need to recognize that learners are coming to have a integrated, coordinated, like well-designed educational program.
Right.
To do that well, competency-based curriculum models, there's nothing scary about them.
Mm.
It just means we're going to make it all explicit, right? Rather than have it be implicit, we're going to make it all explicit. And we're going to all agree on what we're talking about. Okay, that sounds like a good idea to me, and it's in the best interest of students and learners.
Right. Excellent. Excellent advice. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time, for your expertise. It's a great pleasure to have you. Truly inspirational. Really appreciate this. Is just fantastic overview. Thank you very much. Next up, Dr. Hiju Jiang from College of San Mateo is going to introduce Dr. Cynthia Howell from Capella University. Welcome.
Okay, I start all over again. I didn't realize I was muted. That was good practice.
Good morning.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Hiju Jiang. I'm from College of San Mateo. I'm very happy to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Cynthia Howell. Dr. Cynthia Howell has served as a faculty for leadership for higher education in the Graduate School of Public Services and Education at Capella University since 2004. She has designed and taught courses on assessment, program evaluation, advising and retention, and others, and serves on dissertation committees as chair or member. Cynthia has taught courses in assessment to over 1,000 emerging and practicing professionals in higher education in her graduate courses. Her primary professional focus is to facilitate the development of a culture of assessment in higher education. Let's welcome Dr. Howell.
Thank you, Hiju. And thank you, Jarek and Enrique and all of the coaches. And thank you, Dr. Senese, because I so enjoy working with you. And I think you can see, folks, why we are so proud to have him as the president of Capella University. I am in my 20th year of working for Capella University and very proud to do that. I'm going to be sharing my screen if I can get this up for you here. Okay, let's see if you can see that. That's just a reminder of the theme for this particular symposium is relevant and equitable learning. And as Dick said, I'm going to be doing a little bit deeper dive to some of what he explained about Capella's focus for competency-based learning. And so let's start with engaging everybody, and that is what brings you here today. Perhaps you are teaching in higher education. Perhaps you are in administration or student services. We're going to address those because there's been confusion about where does assessment begin? Who's responsible for it on a campus? You know, we've got offices now of institutional effectiveness, offices of assessment and evaluation, and we never used to have those in the old days. Perhaps you have another position in higher education. You might be new to assessment. You might be a seasoned assessment practitioner, or you might be here because everyone's favorite, accreditation. I'm going to address that a little bit as well. In fact, way back in 1994, I was the dean at a private career college, small college, And we were up for accreditation. The visit was scheduled, and all of a sudden we learned that we had to be showing what we did for assessment. And all of my faculty went, well, what is that? Are they going to be looking at our grades? We were so grade focused. We were so focused on what had been required for accreditation before. Okay, how many of our faculty hold doctorates? How many holdings do we have in the library? Some of this might sound familiar, but instead we were being asked to demonstrate way back in 1994 how we conducted assessment of student learning outcomes. So we had a very big learning curve for doing what we did pass. We did just fine, okay? But it was a little nerve-wracking to say the least. I want to talk then about some of the non-movable parts of assessment. I believe you're all familiar with these, but I'm just going to get very specific about them. We know what competency-based education is. Competencies that we enable our students at Capella, we call them learners, so I will be using that term as well. We allow them the opportunity to demonstrate the competencies, as Dick referred to. We've been a competency-based institution, and I will discuss a little bit how we arrived there, but it's the critical skills and knowledge and abilities, or as Dick said, the interpersonal enterprise, the interpersonal connections that people are going to be demonstrating. It's required for the mastery of a subject matter in a particular program that the students are pursuing. Well, in order to determine if they've achieved the competencies, we assess their achievement of those competencies. And so Bresciani in 2011 gave just the perfect starting point. Assessment is all about wondering whether what we do all day is contributing to what we are intending to accomplish. Is it that we are intending for our students, our learners, to accomplish these competencies? And so we kind of refocused our lens away from grades, away from everything else that we've focused on in higher education, to assessing their level of achievement of the competencies that they are allowed to examine and learn in higher education in their courses. And then let's look at the last one. There's a lot of definitions out there of assessment, and there are problems with quite a few of them, by the way. So assessment, according to the degree qualifications profile, which I highly recommend, one of the best documents in regard to assessment, is a process for the collection and analysis of evidence about the assessment of student learning outcomes used to determine student proficiency and improve, or to demonstrate the effectiveness of an educational program or institution. And as we break that down, it's a process. First of all, we are going through a step-by-step process to collect through assessments, you might call them assignments, and analysis of that evidence about their achievement. It is focused entirely on student learning outcomes. Did they learn the competencies? Did they master the competencies that they were intended to? It determines their level of proficiency, and we then use that data to improve. I hope we'll improve. We'll take a look at a graph in a minute, or demonstrate the effectiveness of the educational program or institution. Let's go back to accreditation. That's what accreditation is asking us to do. You might know that at least a few years ago, the number one cause of there being probation status for institutions was that they fell short of demonstrating what they have for assessment of learning outcomes and how that's contributing to the effectiveness of the educational program or institution. Okay, let's move along. I see some questions coming up. let's take a look at the common challenges for assessment. And I'm going to narrow this down to the assessment courses that I designed and taught at Capella University, because I learned so much from the master's and doctoral students that I had in those courses. These were mid-career professionals, and they were, as Dick Senese said, they're typically going for promotions, advancement in their careers. And so they came back to get perhaps a doctorate degree, and assessment is one of the courses that they take, at least one of the courses that they take to complete that degree. So we had to start with shifting away from what they had as preconceived notions about assessment. So we worked on defining assessment accurately. And the definition I just gave you from the degree qualifications profile is among the very best that exist, in my opinion. And then the other problem was helping them to distinguish assessment from grading. Just like in 1994, my faculty at the career college where I served as dean had to do. We kept focusing on the students' grades. Well, I think we all know that one professor or instructor might see an assignment as worthy of an A, whereas another one might say, oh, that's no better than a C+. So grades are way too subjective to be an accurate indication of the assessment of learning outcomes. We also had to work on distinguishing assessment from evaluation. There was a mid-career professional in one of my courses. One day I asked her, I noticed that you always use assessment and evaluation together. You always are using that wording in whatever you write in our discussions or in any of your assessments. And she said, well, at my institution, we just use those words together. I thought they were the same thing. So not knowing the distinction and going with the language that she had been accustomed to using at her institution, she continued to use assessment from evaluation. And of course, by the end of her course in assessment, she recognized and acknowledged the distinction that is just so important. The second bullet down, realizing that assessment can occur anywhere, not just in our classrooms. It's not just about academics. Institutions of higher learning are that. They are about learning, and therefore learning outcomes are possible anywhere that the student is engaged in, on the university campus or online in our case. And then another challenge we had to overcome was perceiving how crucial assessment was. It's about improving a student experience in a course, in a program, in the institution. It's not an add-on, which is what a lot of people came into this thinking it was. It was just another hoop that we had to go through in order to gain reaccreditation. And they all came to realize, no, accreditation is there to determine if we are doing what we say we are doing, which is helping our students to learn, enabling them to develop the competencies that they need. So it's not just about accreditation. Very, very nutshell, I'm going to talk a little bit about the effective practices that my students, my learners in the assessment courses engaged in, but then they turn around and apply them at their institutions. And as Dick referred to, we start with what are the competencies that they need to have? What do they need to be able to know and do and demonstrate in order to show that they've got the competencies to go into their professional careers or in life in general? They have to be observable and measurable and clearly stated. So we spend a lot of time up front designing what the outcomes are to be. That's called backward design, as many of you probably already know. So we start with identifying those. What's really important is that our students, our learners, know up front at the beginning what it is that they will be expected to demonstrate. Dick made reference that in every single one of our courses, they begin by seeing on the syllabus, here's what you will be expected to be able to demonstrate. And there are maybe 4, maybe 5 different assessments. And that is in every course that we have at Capella. And then as those are all added together, all those competencies are added together, they then arrive at achievement of the competencies for the entire program. Wonderful thing that Capella does, and I was very proud and privileged to be engaged in the process of alignment in a particular program of the courses to the program to the institution. The institution has competencies that we expect every graduate to have attained. And there is a way of aligning those. We did a presentation at a conference a few years ago on the very grueling process at first. And then all of a sudden, it just became easier and easier the more we did it, just like with any kind of learning. Authentic assessment. Dick drew reference to authentic assessment. And Dick, got to tell you, what you defined is exactly what I would define too, and what the learners in our assessment courses used as well. They create assignments, assessments, related to what they're going to be expected to do in their professions and their lives. So when we did the backward design, we would start with, okay, in this particular field, what is it that they're going to be expected to know and do? And that led to the authentic assessment in the class, aligned with what they will need to do in their professions or in their lives. We also have measurable criteria for each one of the competencies. They create these assignments. They're related to what they will be expected to do in their professional lives. And we measure them according to a rubric. Dick made reference to the fact that all of our rubrics are divided into 4 components. We do have that they haven't achieved that competency according to what they've submitted. We do have basic, proficient, and then we also have distinguished. They've gone above and beyond. They've gone to a higher level to demonstrate their knowledge, their attainment of those skills and abilities. And then grading. Okay, I could say so much about grading. I'm going to tell a little story here. Many years ago at a different institution, I had a student who quarreled with me about his grade. I bet a few of you have had that experience. And it was very interesting. During an activity, and this was a live and in-person course, the student came up to me in the front of the classroom and privately said, I really think I deserve an A on that assignment that you just handed back. And he proceeded to get a little stern with me. And I managed to say, I'm sorry, but that in order to have achieved an A, you needed to have done this, this, and this. The next class period, he came back, and regarding the same assignment, he got down on his knees and started being very sweet. I was sitting down at my desk, and he got down on his knees beside me and started being very sweet and said, I really need this A because, I'm here on a scholarship and I need to demonstrate this. I bet some of this sounds familiar to so many of you, that one way or another, our learners once in a while will try to jockey for a higher grade, and they have a reason for doing so. But that backs us into a corner of being grade focused rather than focused on the assessment of their learning outcomes. Well, another colleague of mine, when he was faced with a similar situation, he said to the student, why don't you come back and show me where on this assessment, this assignment, you have demonstrated achievement of that competency. He turned it around, and instead of us having to defend why we assign a grade, we have the students become accountable for their own grades, their own level of achievement, their own attainment of those competencies. So there's a lot we could do with grades. It's become a measure of, according to the students, it's become a measure of where they have to be. They tell me that their employers want to see all A's. And I remember when I was hiring people at the college where I served as dean, I got a little nervous if they had all A's, because we now have the problem that we have for many years now of grade inflation. And it made me wonder, is this person, because he has all A's, one who has been a victim of grade inflation, or do those A's truly represent what he or she has learned? I'll come back to that later. Linda Seske is one of the most knowledgeable people in the field of assessment. Perhaps you have met her at one of the conferences she presents at, or perhaps you have used her book, Assessing Student Learning, A Common Sense Guide. She's got 3 editions of that book. The most recent is 2018. This book was used in the assessment courses that I taught. And I worked with Linda because she was always interested in how the graduate students were responding to her book. And so I was privileged to be able to work with her on that 3rd edition. There are 4 components of effective assessment, according to Linda Seske. Again, the backward design. We create clear, observable, expected goals. What is it that they are expected to know and demonstrate that they know? That's a whole new session. We could spend so much time, and I've done that at conferences, on how to compose those, how to construct the goal statement so that the students know exactly what they're supposed to be able to know and do. The next step then, of course, is the teaching. We provide appropriate opportunities for students to achieve those outcomes. Dick referred to Capella University's FlexPath. Well, FlexPath allows those students to work independently on taking advantage of the opportunity with the materials that are provided to achieve those stated goals, those stated learning outcomes that they are to demonstrate. And then we, the 3rd bullet, gather and analyze the resulting data. That data is from the assessments. The assessments are tied very clearly and accurately to those expected goals. We see if there is evidence of the actual learning, if that aligns with the intended outcomes, the competencies that the students are to demonstrate. And then that all important 4th one, we utilize the information to improve student learning, perhaps to improve the course, to improve the program. And how do we do that? Well, we might have to change our teaching. We might have to change the resources that we use. We might have to change the means of assessment. I'd like to share with you some of the words of the students in past years who have gone through these assessment courses. And as we all know, and I hope it's not happening, but I know it is, one of the educators in one of my courses said that it's seen as a form of punishment if your students don't do well. Well, we discussed that extensively. Linda Seske discusses it extensively. One of the fastest ways to kill an assessment effort is to use the results to evaluate individual faculty, especially if disappointing results are used to penalize faculty. The fourth component of effective assessment that Linda Susky defines is using the resulting data to make changes, to improve. We don't use that resulting data to judge faculty because it could very well be that the assessments are off. It could be that maybe there does need to be some adjustment in teaching. It could be that there are other changes that need to be made. So we work with the faculty, not against them. Another of my learners in one of my assessment courses wrote, "Assessment forces us to reflect on what is working and what is not in an effort to help students achieve optimal goals. It's easy to grow complacent over the years and to ignore the changing needs of students. Assessment does not allow complacency or apathy when done properly." If those of you who've been through assessment cycles, we know that very, very often the results after the accreditation visit is over and we get the results, sometimes it's placed on a shelf. A lot of my learners, we discussed that. It was placed on a shelf. They got word, oh my gosh, your 5 years or your 10 years are up. It's time for another visit. And then all of a sudden those books would come down off the shelf and they would, in a panic, begin to go through them and suddenly make changes. No, the changes should have been made when we received the results. So as this learner wrote, we need to reflect on what's working and what is not, and then make the changes necessary. Assessment isn't just about academics. In fact, a great number of people in my courses work from the student services side of the house, as this last quotation reflects. One learner wrote, "Coming from the student affairs side of the house, it took a while for me to grasp the concept of assessing the learning of the student and not assessing how material is to be taught." That points to the distinction between assessment and evaluation. Evaluation is quite different from assessment, but assessment is a part of evaluation. And a couple more to conclude here. Having worked in administration for so many years without a clear understanding of what we were expecting or looking for at with regard to assessment provided frustration with the process and lack of results. It is definitely a collaboration and should be enforced as such. That leads me to the question of who's responsible for assessment. Is it the Office of Assessment and Institutional Effectiveness? Is it a particular department? Is it solely in the realm of faculty? Because faculty so often feel that assessments imposed upon them when actually faculty are the starting point of assessment. They are the ones in the trenches working with the students and accountable for determining if the students are meeting the competencies that are stated in their courses to be achieved. And then finally, the one we all know and love. Higher Learning Commission is coming next month to check on our progress. So there's a lot of scrambling going on. When the assessment process started, there was a lot of resentment and bad taste in people's mouths, but I can honestly say that taste will start to go away. The person taking this course was in an administrative position, and she had now the tools to approach it differently, not just scramble and wonder what should they be doing, the frustration, the confusing, but a step-by-step process of how assessment is to take place. And yes, her institution had been dinged previously because assessment was found to be lacking as the criteria, one of the criteria for the achievement of successful assessment at their institution. And just leave you with a cycle of assessment. There's a few different versions of this, but this basically summarizes what I've been talking about. At the top of the circle is defining outcomes. What are those goals? What are those competencies that students are to achieve? How do we align the learning experience with the outcomes that they are intended to demonstrate? We collect and analyze the evidence from the assessments that are aligned with the competencies, and then we interpret the results. We interpret the results by determining, are they achieving the competencies that were designed and that were aligned with what they have to know and be able to do in their professions and in life. And then finally, we use the results. The results are used to make improvements. At the pinnacle, we hope that the results are used as evidence that we have achieved what we said we were going to achieve. But typically it's a cycle, because we use the results to make improvements, which then leads us to that top item again. We maybe redefine our outcomes. Do we need to redefine what the competencies are? And as our students continue to change, as we continue to change professions, as Dick said, there's new professions, new jobs coming out. There's new programs that we're offering. And we need to be focusing on what our students are going to need in the near future. And with that, I'll ask if there are any questions, and stop sharing my screen.
This is Alicia Betancourt. I did have one question. How could competency-based education or focus on student learning rather than grades or course completion help faculty infuse equitable pedagogies into their classrooms?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's one that we all need to deal with. We need to have equitable pedagogies. Oh, Alicia, are you from back east? Because I got my degree from William and Mary, and we said pedagogies, but I moved out to the West and we used pedagogies.
I did. I grew up in New York, and I actually lived in Virginia Beach for many years.
We were neighbors then. We
Yes.
were neighbors then. Yes, equitable pedagogies. Well, guess what? Assessment is actually the key to doing that, because we focus entirely just on to what extent a student has achieved the stated competencies. Whereas thinking, oh, I've got to be a dispenser of grades, which is what that young man that I told you about considered me to be. He considered me to be the holder of the little basket of grades, and I could deal out whichever grade I wanted. I had a conversation with a former professor a few nights ago, and she said, you know, I felt so bad for that student. He'd been through so much. I decided to give him this grade. Or I'm going to tell you another story. I was very privileged to be an advisor when I was getting my doctorate years and years ago at Northern Arizona University. And I learned so much from being the advisor of our Navajo students. And I worked closely with one particular Navajo woman. She was applying for a kind of a summer program at Stanford University. And I worked with her on her application. We talked about it, and I didn't hear from her for about a month. And then one day she came roaring into my office and she said, I got it. I got it. I'm going to Stanford. I was accepted for the program, the summer program. And she whispered to me, and it's not because I'm Indian. She knew it was because she demonstrated what they were looking for. I was so proud of her, but even more so, she was so proud of herself, because she recognized that she had demonstrated the competencies. She'd met the requirements, and she wasn't being handed something because of some special situation. So I will say assessment and staying faithful to measuring the level of achievement of the competencies is the key to an equitable campus environment.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Howell. Thank you very much, Cynthia. Very, again, inspirational. Thank you very much for putting it all in such great perspective, the grading, the assessment, the equity. Oh, yes, this is just the best example I could think of. So I'm grateful. Really, really, really appreciate your insights. With that, thank you very much for joining us. And with that, here's Bethany Tasaka from San Bernardino Valley College to introduce Dr. Margaret Moodian. Good morning, Bethany.
Thank you. Good morning. So I have the pleasure of introducing our third speaker this morning. Dr. Margaret Moodian is an associate professor at the University of Massachusetts Global. She serves as president on the board of an international nonprofit. She also serves on a K-12 school board. Among other awards, Dr. Moodian was named Teacher of the Year at University of Massachusetts Global in 2022. Congratulations. Margaret earned a doctorate in education, a master's degree in psychology from Pepperdine University, and a bachelor's degree in fine arts from Chapman University. Her dissertation focuses on the leadership traits of female Fortune 1000 board members. She lives with her husband, Dr. Mike Moodian, her son Mikey, and pets in Rancho Mission Viejo, California. Welcome, Dr. Moodian.
Thank you for that nice introduction. I'll share my screen. Oh, let's see who she can share. All participants. Let's see. Am I able to share my screen here?
You should be able to, Dr. Moodian.
Okay, share screen. It's not, let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay. Can you all see it?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Okay. Great. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. It's a real pleasure. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. Here? Oh, yeah. Okay. Good. It's a real pleasure being here with all of you today. It was wonderful hearing from Dr. Senese and Dr. Howell about the Capella program. And it's fascinating to hear a lot of the similarities and how we are all helping students to be as successful as they can with competency-based education. So a little bit about University of Massachusetts and me. I got that nice introduction. I've been teaching at University of Massachusetts Global for the past 7 years. I've been teaching there 10 years total. I started in the traditional program, and I also was in the writing center as well. Some programs I teach in include the Bachelor's of Business and IT programs. I teach the humanities for that. And I also teach in the Masters of Arts in Organizational Leadership program that's competency-based. And some of the competencies I teach include information literacy, oral communications, organizational dynamics, organizational leadership theory and behavior. And I'll share more about how competency-based really helps that to be the best it can be. I'm also on the board that oversees the competency-based at my school, so I kind of have some leadership roles as well there. And I also am on the alumni board as the faculty representative. So one neat thing about that is that I can see our competency-based graduates successful in the world and see how the competencies that they learned are applicable to the real world. As mentioned, I'm involved in the community as well. Of the My Path program really gets me time to be involved in the community. And that's really beneficial for my students because I am then able to teach what I do in the community. I'm a practitioner And I can share that knowledge with my students when I teach them, as well as when I develop programs. I've helped develop several programs in our school and build the competencies as well, but I'll focus on the teaching today. And she shared about my family. Here's my son. I have to share a picture. I have a 7-year-old, and he's the light of my life. And he's also helped me to understand more about the K through 12 system, and makes me realize that there's some opportunities there, which I'll talk about as well. So what I'll be talking about in my presentation, the benefits of competency-based education and teaching, and being enrolled in that as well. My role in University of Massachusetts Global My Path program, and the future of competency-based education. So benefits of competency-based education for students and teachers. So flexibility is a major one. With competency-based education and the program at University of Massachusetts Global, the My Path program, students can work anywhere, anytime. They open up their computer and work whenever they can. It's in bite-sized pieces. It's, as was talked about, all-you-can-eat program, where students can take as many classes or as few as they want. They can go as fast as slow as they want. And so this is really nice when you have a family. If you're working multiple jobs, you can open up your computer on your work break. And the beauty of CBE is you don't have all the work done week after week. You can get it done when you want. So there's not that pressure for the 8 weeks. And I remember when I was in graduate school, I worked full time, and I would go to the Pepperdine campus and work a few nights a week and be in class for hours at a time. And luckily I didn't have a family then, but it was not convenient. And I did not feel that the class time was as productive as it could have been. And with the competency-based programs, you are getting every minute is time well spent. You know, we're looking for accessibility, flexibility, and applicability to work. And you're getting all of that with the competency-based program. Students can have a lesson and then they can apply it to their work right then and there. The flexibility, of course, it's all about the students, and that's what we really care about. But it's also wonderful being a teacher in the program. I've spoken with groups of faculty that work in traditional programs who are possibly going into competency-based, and they have some real hesitations. But I'm here to say it's wonderful to teach in a competency-based program. The students get the flexibility, but so do I. So I can have the best of both worlds. I get to pick my son up from school and drop him off. And if I'm on my way somewhere and I'm early, I can stop by Starbucks and get some work done, because my work is in bite-sized pieces too. We have a wonderful, wonderful LMS, which is called Strut. And we have a queue of work that we need to get done. And we grade the students' work within 72 hours. And the queue shows the most recent work and the most work that needs to get attention to. And so I'm always on top of it. I'm not having to look in different places for the grading that I'm supposed to do. So it's really nice to not have to worry about missing something. It's all right there in the queue. So the personalization is wonderful for the students as well. The students get to work a lot on what they really need to learn. And if they have some work experience or they are knowledgeable about something, they can kind of gloss over it a little more. So they take assessments and the work is personalized to them. They can even take different types of classes within a program that are catered to their needs. So this personalization and within the learning management system is wonderful for students. And with the assessments, this is personalized as well, as was talked about in the previous presentations. They are taking what they learn and applying it right away, which leads me to instant application. So with the assessments, the students are learning about theory and concepts in the competencies, and they are working on project-based assessments. And so they, for the organ assessment, they are working on a organizational challenge, and they will look at a challenge and then apply the theories and concepts as mentioned, and then they will come up with solutions. And we will work as if they are going to present this to a board. So it is a video that they produce, a presentation, and a PowerPoint presentation as well, and a paper along with that. And they're building this within the competency. So they're building the project and then they go to the final assessment, and they've been working on this. So really convenient, and they're learning how to work in those bite-sized pieces to come up with a big project. I had a student who was in the military in Germany, and he was getting really upset because he recognized that a disproportionate number of brown people were getting, they were getting punished a lot more than their counterparts. And so he saw a need for a DEI committee within his final assessment for the organizational leadership theory and behavior. And so that's the instant application. He was really making an impactful difference within his final assessment. So these are just one of the many stories of how this instant application is important. There was a Lumina study that came out that showed that, I'll back up a little bit. We have corporate partners with our school, and so Walmart is one of those. And the Lumina study showed that students that are in these programs are much more likely to get promoted than their counterparts that are not. So that's another area where this instant application can have monetary rewards as well with these students, which is pretty remarkable. So what I do in my role at the program at UMass Global. So there are several components. So I grade milestone posts and final assessments, which I talked a little bit about earlier. So the competencies, we call them competencies rather than classes. And within the competencies, they talked about backward design. Well, there are different activities for to gain competency. So within the platform and the competency, there's the activities, and then there's the milestone posts. So milestone posts are at the end of some of the competencies to assess the students on whether or not they understand the material. And when I grade the milestone posts, I either affirm it, which means that they've gotten all of the material and they know it, or I don't affirm it, and they just need to keep working until they get that mastered. So with milestone posts, the students, the milestone post is written as, please share what this activity said. Yes.
Dr. Medium, are you having trouble with your phones? Maybe get closer to your mic or.
Oh, Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Much better.
All right. Yeah, so with the milestone posts, they are looking at whether or not they have gotten the material. One example is for oral communication. It talks about presentation about Lincoln, and in the activity, it says that you wouldn't necessarily want a picture of Lincoln because everyone knows what Lincoln looks like. So if a student says a picture of Lincoln, I know that they have not read the material, and I will not affirm that. That's just one example. Another example of what would be in a milestone post is they apply their personal experience. And this is really important. It always makes things easier to understand when you've applied your personal experience, and you can make that more intimate with you. And then also, how can this be applied, or what would you do to change in the future? So an example with interpersonal communications, what might you do to communicate better in the future? You might want to work on your listening skills, or something like that. So that's the grading of the milestone posts. And I have spoken with groups before that are a little worried about the workload with working with a competency-based program. And I say it's really actually nice, because you're not having to grade everything all at once at the end of each week or the end of 8 weeks. You're grading everything intermittently, so it's always there. But it's in bite-sized pieces, and it has that flexibility, which is nice. With the teaching in the competency-based program, also, there are 8 of us that are full-time, but then we bring in adjunct faculty when the workload gets really high. So that can help with our workload as well. My leadership is really cognizant of, we do well when we teach, when we're taken care of. So they really make sure that we're not overwhelmed, which is really wonderful. So I'm a big believer, you take care of yourself, you take care of your people, and then the students get taken care of as well. With the competency-based programs, we can be more student-centered, and that's really wonderful. We talk to have a faculty member when they want help, and you don't always get that in traditional programs. With grading final assessments, the Dr. Howell and Dr. Senese kind of went over this, and it's very similar with us. We grade by the rubric. There are 4 different columns. The bottom 2, you do not get a pass, and then with the top 2, you do. And it's a lot better than grades with the rubric, because you either met the criteria or you didn't. I love rubrics. And then they're not arguing about a grade. You just pass or you didn't. So once in a while, I'll get a student complain that they didn't pass, but I have to say, look, the rubric said you didn't pass. It's not me. You can't argue with that. It's right there. So I love not having to worry about if it's subjective or not. It's not subjective. So those final assessments are wonderful. So my favorite part of the job is meeting with students via Zoom. And I can do this. A lot of times students will reach out when they're starting the competency, which is what I usually recommend, because they then might get information about the competency that they might not from reading the assignments. But a lot of times I'll meet with students when they did not pass a final assessment, or when they're having issues with the milestone posts. So I had a student who had just graduated from high school. We have students that are just out of high school to grandparents. And this student said he liked the competency-based program even better than high school because he didn't feel intimidated when we were in Zoom, and he didn't have to be in a different space. He was in his house and he felt really comfortable talking with me, the professor. I get to learn about students from all over the country and world when I'm on Zoom, and it's wonderful. I had one student who, she lived in Arkansas, worked at Walmart, and she had a bird farm, and she was sharing her birds, and she even did a project on her birds, which is really fun because when the students are excited about a project, then that shows with their project, and you can feel that as well, which is really fun. So meeting with students via Zoom is really my favorite part. Sometimes I meet with students in person. And the other neat thing about our program is we have students that are working the floor at Walmart. And then I had a vice president of the local chamber who was a student as well. She just had become really successful, but she had not gotten her degree. And I got to meet with her in person, and we had lunch, and she talked about the program. So it's neat getting to know different types of people that are different places in their life in the program. Update links. So within the platform, sometimes we use outside links, and so we're always updating those. And that is just one of the fun parts of the job. Competency updates. We want to make sure everything's up to date with our curriculum. And so a lot of times we'll have outside professionals that will share what the new and greatest material is. And so we will do those competency updates. Program review, which we do every couple of years. We look at the programs, we look at the class pass rates, and we make sure that the classes are as effective as they can be. And so what parts of the program could be improved, what's working, what isn't. One example might be that, this class doesn't have APA 7 yet, it's APA 6, and so we need to update that. There's new trends in IT, so let's change the curriculum to represent that. As mentioned, I represent the faculty on Program Council, the CBE leadership team for our school. And also, because of the flexibility, I'm involved in all parts of our school. I serve on doctoral dissertation committees, and I get to work with students on their dissertations, which I really enjoy. As I mentioned, I'm also on the alumni board, and I just feel so fortunate that I get to do so much. And I say that's in large part because I have that flexibility in my role. I also provide feedback on the LMS strut. We're constantly evolving, they're constantly improving. And so I will share feedback about what I'm experiencing and how that could be improved. One improvement they just made was sometimes with the milestone posts, I would affirm them and they on accident because I meant to not affirm, but now they just put in a not affirm button. And it seems small and maybe kind of trivial, but that not affirm button was really helpful. So those are some of the results of our feedback. So now we'll talk about the future of competency-based education. And I've been thinking about this a lot. I think with the Chat GPT, that's really interesting. I don't know too much about it, but a lot of people seem nervous, but at the same time, people were really nervous with calculators and the use of those in classrooms. So will this be a tool that students can use to have the best writing that they possibly can? I don't know. Or we might have a student just created software that can sense if paper's been written by ChatGPT, sure will tell. I also see a larger range of students being covered. I do a lot of work in South Africa, and there's a lot of students who aren't really reached by technology. And so with Starlink that Elon Musk has come up with, are we going to see more of that? So we're going to be able to reach more students with this technology. That would be wonderful. Also, I see this being more personalized, and with traditional teaching, the faculty focus on research and not necessarily being student focused. And we're going to see more student-centeredness and more teachers focusing on the student as a whole. I just read that the faculty are demanding higher pay because they're dealing with students with emotional issues. And I'm seeing this too. There's unspeakable things that I can't share in this talk that some of my students deal with. And it's really hard. And I have a psychology degree, but I don't have a counseling degree. It's not a teacher's job to be a counselor. So we really have to think about how are we going to best serve these students? And I've talked with our provost, and I advocate for mental health services, but students don't utilize these. So we're going to have to find ways to get these students the help they need, because they can't learn and be successful if they don't have that mental health help. But the future of CB, I'm really excited about. I thought about the possibility of using the virtual reality. How neat would that be if they get to be in a room with the board of directors virtually before they actually go into one? That'd be pretty neat. So a lot of opportunity. I read a book called, let's see, what's it called? Grass by Sanjay Sarma. And he talks about students that are not getting the help they need. We need to make opportunities for everyone. Just because someone had issues with school doesn't mean they're not going to be successful. I also see a lot more movement into K-12. As I talked about with my son, I'm seeing that the traditional ways of education are not really meeting everyone's needs. And I see a real opportunity for CBE there. We could make some real big changes that could create opportunities to assist everyone in a way that works. So I'm excited, and thank you for this opportunity. And I don't know if you have questions, but it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. This is Bethany again. I do have a question for you. What are some of the considerations for faculty when it comes to the assessment of skill and competency attainment rather than just covering the course content during lecture?
Yeah, can you repeat that one more time?
Sure. What are considerations for faculty when it comes to assessing skill and competency attainment rather than just covering course content during class or lecture?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think I can answer that in the right way for you. So we have moved from the testing to assessment, and students are being assessed on whether they have learned the skills. So an example might be if they're giving a board of directors presentation for a final assessment, the rubric is showing us if they have met all of the requirements and they have the skills for that. So are they using theories and concepts? And are they showing a good grasp of those? And are they speaking in a way that's appropriate for a board of directors? And we can measure that by the effectiveness of their talk. And so these are all meeting them where they're at and making sure that they have the appropriate skills. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. That sounds good. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Bethany. Thank you. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Dr. Moodian. Yeah, these are all topics that are just ongoing, and you have certainly summarized really a number of those issues that we've been discussing, that we've been talking about for quite some time. So thank you so much for the inspiration. Thank you for your time and sharing of your expertise. Let's see here. It looks like we are at the break time. So we are going to be starting our breakout sessions in about 10-15 minutes. Again, thank you very much, the keynotes. Thank you, coaches, for moderating the discussion. And we'll see you on the other side in about 15 minutes. Please, there is really quite a bit of quite a good selection of breakout sessions awaiting us. We'll see you back at 10